My name is Aurora Vale. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my life, I've been the daughter people forgot was standing in the room. The day I graduated from university, the day I walked across a stage after years of sacrifice, debt, exhaustion, and quiet resilience, my father didn't show up. He didn't call, he didn't text, he didn't apologize. Later that evening, I found out why. He chose my sister's backyard BBQ instead. Not a wedding, not an emergency, a barbecue with ribs, music, laughter, and my empty seat in the audience where my father was supposed to be. If that sounds unbelievable, stay with me. And before I go any further, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been passed over for someone louder, needier, or more loved, subscribe, like, and share this story. You're not alone, even if it feels that way right now. Because what happened that day didn't just break my heart, it erased a name I had carried my entire life. The graduation hall smelled like perfume, polished wood, and nerves. Families filled the seats early, waving phones in the air, saving spots, whispering names. I stood backstage in my cap and gown, clutching the program so tightly the paper bent under my fingers. My name, Aurora Vale, was printed there in clean black ink. It felt official, heavy, earned. I scanned the crowd one last time. Front rows, mothers daubing their eyes, fathers leaning forward with cameras, siblings shouting names too loudly. I searched for my dad's face. Nothing. I told myself he was parking, or stuck in traffic, or grabbing coffee. He was never early, but he was always there, at least physically. Emotionally was another story, but I wasn't greedy. I just wanted him in a chair. 5 minutes passed, then 10. My phone buzzed. Not from him. It was my sister, Leela. "Where are you? Dad says you didn't even try to come. Everyone's asking." I reread the message 3 times. Didn't even try to come? My stomach dropped. I typed back with shaking thumbs. Come where? The reply came instantly, cheerful, careless. The BBQ, obviously. Dad's here already. He brought his famous potato salad. The world went quiet. I stared at the screen as my name was called over the loudspeaker. Aurora Vale. Applause erupted. I walked forward because my legs remembered how, even when my heart didn't. As I crossed the stage, I smiled the way you're supposed to smile, the way girls like me learn to smile, polite, controlled, unburdening others from our disappointment. Inside, something cracked. Growing up, my father liked to say he treated his daughters equally. He said it often, like a slogan, but equality in our house was theoretical, spoken, never practiced. Leela was 3 years younger than me and born with a gravity I never had. She laughed louder, cried harder, needed more, and my father orbited her like a moon that couldn't escape. If Leela had a bad day, the house shifted. If I had a good one, it passed quietly. When I was 10, I won a regional writing contest. I came home clutching the certificate, heart racing. My dad glanced at it once and said, "That's nice, Rory," before turning back to help Leela with her science project. She didn't even place. That was the first time I learned the difference between being loved and being tolerated. Still, I believed, foolishly, that milestones mattered, that graduation would be different, that this was big enough to earn me a seat in his attention. I was wrong. After the ceremony, families flooded the courtyard. I stood alone near a fountain, holding my diploma like proof I existed. My phone stayed silent. Then it rang. Dad. I answered immediately. "Hey, Rory," he said casually, like we were picking up a conversation from yesterday. "Congrats on the thing." "The thing?" My voice sounded far away, even to me. "Yeah, School stuff. I could hear music in the background, laughter, someone clinking bottles. Listen, Leela's BBQ ran long. People showed up unexpectedly. I figured you'd understand. I laughed once, a short, broken sound. You didn't even tell me you weren't coming. Well, you didn't remind me, and Leela really needed me today. Needed you to grill meat. I didn't say that. I never said the things I should have said. I stood on that stage alone. He sighed, impatient. Aurora, don't make this dramatic. We'll celebrate later. Later never came. That night, I went home to my apartment and peeled my graduation gown off like a second skin I no longer wanted. I sat on the floor and cried until my chest hurt. Not because he missed it, but because some part of me had expected him not to, and that part had been right. A week passed, then 2. Photos surfaced online. My dad in an apron, Leela leaning into him, smiling. The caption read, "Best BBQ ever. Couldn't have done it without you, Dad." Something inside me hardened. I stopped calling. No one noticed. The idea of changing my name didn't come suddenly. It grew quietly, like a seed planted in a crack. Every time someone said Vale, it felt like a reminder of the family I belonged to in theory, not in truth. I started using my middle name at cafes, then at work, then on emails. And the strangest thing happened. I felt lighter, as if I were slowly stepping out of a shadow I'd been standing in my whole life. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that my absence would eventually be noticed, not because they missed me, but because they needed something only Aurora Vale could give. And when my father finally came looking for me, he didn't recognize the woman who answered the door. Because the day my dad realized I was gone for good was the same day he discovered I was no longer willing to save him. I didn't disappear all at once. People imagine walking away as a dramatic moment, bags packed, doors slammed, final speeches delivered with shaking hands. Mine was quieter, slower, like fading ink on a page no one rereads. I stopped correcting people when they mispronounced my name at work. I stopped showing up to family group chats. I stopped explaining myself. Weeks turned into months, and my absence became normal, comfortable. That hurt more than anger ever could. The first time my father noticed something was wrong wasn't when I stopped calling. It wasn't when I skipped Thanksgiving. It wasn't even when I changed my name on social media. It was when he needed help and realized he didn't know how to reach me anymore. That's when he showed up. It was a Tuesday evening, raining hard enough to blur the city lights outside my apartment window. I had just gotten home from work, shoes kicked off, hair pulled loose, when the knock came. 3 sharp raps, impatient, familiar. I didn't open the door right away. I knew it was him before I checked the peephole. Fathers knock like they own the space behind the door, even when they haven't earned it in years. When I finally opened it, he smiled like nothing had changed. "There you are," he said, stepping forward. I didn't move. He hesitated, confused. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" I studied him the way you study an old photograph, recognizable but emotionally distant. He looked older, tired. The confidence he wore so easily around Lila slipped when it was just the 2 of us. "So, your sister's getting married?" I blinked. "I didn't know." He frowned. "Well, you would if you answered your phone." "I don't get calls, just accusations." That annoyed him. "There's no need to be hostile," he said. "I came to tell you personally. Lila wants you there." I almost laughed. She doesn't even know who I am anymore. He waved that off. Family is family. You don't just disappear. I folded my arms. You disappeared first. Silence settled between us. Heavy, uncomfortable. Then he sighed and leaned forward. "Look, Aurora, I need a favor." There it was. He explained quickly, like ripping off a bandage. Lila and her fiancé were buying a house. The bank needed a cosigner. My father's credit wasn't strong enough alone. But yours is excellent. You always were responsible. Responsible. Reliable. Useful. You want me to co-sign a mortgage for someone who couldn't even bother to attend my graduation? I asked. He stiffened. That again? Yes, that again, because it never stopped being the moment I realized where I stood. He rubbed his temples. You're holding on to something small. Small. I felt something rise in my chest. Hot, sharp. You chose a barbecue over my graduation. It wasn't about choosing, he snapped. Lila needed support. And I didn't? You're strong, he said. You always have been. That sentence followed me my entire life like a curse. Strong meant overlooked. Strong meant ignored. Strong meant alone. I shook my head slowly. I'm not signing anything. His expression changed, hardened. You owe this family. I met his gaze. No, I survived this family. That's when he noticed the mail of the counter, not addressed to Aurora Vale. He squinted. Who's this? I didn't answer. He picked up an envelope, read the name aloud. A. Rowan. Confusion crept into his voice. Who's Rowan? That's me, I said. His eyes snapped up. What? I changed my name, I repeated. Legally. He stood abruptly. You can't do that. I already did. Why would you do something like that? His voice rose. That name is your identity. I smiled sadly. No, it was your ownership. He looked at me like I slapped him. You're overreacting, he said. You're punishing us for one mistake. One mistake doesn't define a pattern, but a lifetime does. He paced the room, agitated. Lila will be devastated. Lila has always been fine. I'm the one who learned how to disappear without anyone noticing. He stopped pacing. So that's it? You're just gone? I thought about all the times I waited, for praise, for attention, for him to show up. Yes, I said, that's it. He stared at me, eyes searching for something. Guilt, weakness, regret. I gave him none. This isn't over, he warned. I opened the door. It is for me. After he left, I slid down against the door and sat on the floor, shaking. Not because I regretted it, but because I'd never stood my ground before. The next day, my phone exploded. Lila's messages came first. How could you do this to Dad? You're embarrassing the family. You think you're better than us now? Then my aunt, then a cousin, then someone I barely remembered from childhood. No one asked how I felt. They only asked why I wouldn't comply. That was the moment I understood something devastatingly clear. They didn't miss me. They missed what I provided. I blocked every number, changed my email, and for the first time in my life, I let silence stay silent. What I didn't know, what I couldn't see yet, was that Lila's wedding would force everything into the open. Secrets, lies, and the real reason my father had always chosen her over me. Because the story I'd been told my entire life wasn't the truth. And when that truth finally surfaced, it would change the meaning of my name forever. 2 weeks later, I received an invitation addressed to Aurora Vale, sent deliberately, maliciously, containing information that proved my father had been hiding something from me since the day I was born. The invitation arrived on a Thursday morning, slipped halfway under my door like a quiet threat. Thick cream paper, embossed lettering. My old name printed carefully across the front, as if someone had gone out of their way to use it. Aurora Vale. Not A. Rowan. Not the woman I had become. The woman they still believed they could summon. I stood there for a long time, staring at it, feeling something twist deep in my chest. Curiosity is dangerous when you're healing. I knew that. I'd learned the hard way. Still, I bent down and picked it up. Inside was Leela's wedding invitation. Elegant, distasteful, cold. And tucked behind it, folded once, deliberately, was a photocopy of a document I had never seen before, my birth certificate. Or rather, a version of it. I felt the blood drain from my face. The father's name line wasn't blank like I'd always believed. It had been changed. Growing up, I was told my mother died shortly after giving birth to me. It was spoken about carefully, reverently, like a closed door no one should knock on too hard. My father remarried when I was 6. Leela came along a year later, and that was that. I never questioned it. Children accept the stories they're given, especially when asking questions earns silence. But the document in my hands told a different story. The original father's name was crossed out, replaced by the man who raised me, my father, or at least the man I thought was. My hands trembled as I sat on the edge of the couch. I read the document again and again. Dates, signatures, a hospital stamp from a small town 2 hours outside the city. I called the number printed at the bottom of the page without thinking. A woman answered. Yes, records department? I swallowed. I'm calling about a birth certificate. She asked a few routine questions, then paused. Oh, she said softly. Yes, that file has notes. Notes? I echoed. Yes, it says the father's name was amended 6 months after birth. Court approved. Why? My voice cracked. I can't disclose details over the phone, she said gently, but you're welcome to request the full record. I hung up and stared at the wall. So this was it? The thing that lived between my father and me all these years, the reason I never quite belonged. I didn't plan to go to the wedding, I swear I didn't, but when you spend your life being denied truth, you start craving it like air, and something told me that whatever my father had hidden, it lived there, among the speeches and smiles and staged family photos. I requested the records, paid the fee, then I waited. They arrived 3 days before the wedding. I opened the envelope slowly, like it might explode. Inside were legal documents, medical notes, and one handwritten letter. From my mother. Aurora, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't protect you from the truth forever. My breath caught. She wrote about love, about fear, about a man she trusted who didn't want a child yet, about pressure, about signatures made in hospital rooms while she was weak and grieving. Your father is not the man whose name is on your certificate, she wrote. He stepped in when I had no strength left to fight, but he never forgave you for existing. I pressed my hand to my mouth. Suddenly, everything made sense. The distance, the resentment, the way he treated me like an obligation instead of a daughter. Leela wasn't just favored, she was his. I went to the wedding. Not in white, not in black, just something simple, neutral, a woman attending a stranger's celebration. The venue was beautiful, soft lights, fresh flowers, laughter spilling through open doors. My father stood near the altar, beaming. He froze when he saw me. For a split second, I saw it. Fear. You came, he said quietly, approaching me like I might disappear again. I was invited, as Aurora Vale. He flinched. You shouldn't have sent that, the documents. His jaw tightened. I thought it would make you understand. I do, I said. Finally. Music swelled. Guests took their seats. I know, he said low. I wasn't perfect. No, I said calmly. You were deliberate. He opened his mouth to respond, but Leela appeared beside him, glowing. There you are, she said brightly, then noticed the tension. What's wrong? Nothing, he said too quickly. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel jealous. I felt free. I won't stay, I said. I just needed to see you, both of you. Wait, my father said. We can talk after. I shook my head. You've had my whole life." I turned to leave. Behind me, the music stopped. Someone dropped a glass, and then a voice rang out across the room, sharp, unmistakable. "Dad?" Leela said. "What does she mean?" Silence swallowed the space. Every eye turned to us. My father stood frozen, and I realized the truth wasn't just mine anymore, because the next words spoken at that altar would expose a secret powerful enough to shatter a family and force my father to finally admit why he had never chosen me. The silence in the room stretched too long to be accidental. Lila's smile faded slowly, like a dimmer switch being turned down. "Dad?" she repeated, her voice tighter now. "What does she mean?" My father didn't answer. That was the loudest confession of all. The officiant cleared his throat awkwardly. Guests shifted in their seats. Someone whispered my name, Aurora, softly, like they were afraid it might break something fragile. I felt every eye on my back, but I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I already knew what my father's face looked like when he was cornered. I'd seen it my whole childhood. Tight jaw, glassy eyes, silence instead of truth. "Say something," Lila urged, her voice rising. "Why is she standing here acting like this is some kind of drama?" Drama. I turned then, slowly, calmly. "Because it is," I said. "It's just one you've never had to sit through." My father finally spoke. "This is not the time." "When is it?" I asked. "My graduation wasn't the time. My childhood wasn't the time. Should I wait for your funeral?" A murmur rippled through the room. Lila stared at him. "Dad?" He closed his eyes, and that was it. The truth spilled, not in a dramatic confession, but in fragments, half sentences, avoided words. He admitted that I wasn't biologically his, that my mother had been involved with someone else before they married, that he'd stepped up, that he'd done the right thing. "But you never loved her," Lila said slowly, realization dawning. "Did you?" He didn't answer. That was answer enough. I felt something in me loosen. Not pain, clarity. "I didn't come to ruin your wedding," I said quietly. "I came because you sent me proof of a lie I lived under for 32 years. I needed to look you in the eye and see if you were capable of telling the truth now." He met my gaze, finally. "I did my best." "No," I said. "You did what was convenient." Lila shook her head, tears streaming down her face now, not for me, but for the image of her father cracking in front of her. "All those times," she whispered, "all those jokes about Aurora being dramatic, sensitive, difficult." I swallowed. "That wasn't you," I said gently. "That was the story you were given." She looked at me then, really looked at me, like she was seeing me for the first time. And for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I need air," she said, turning away. The officiant whispered something urgent. Guests stood awkwardly, chairs scraped against the floor. The wedding unraveled in slow motion. My father reached for my arm. I stepped back. "Don't," I said. "We're done grabbing." I walked out into the sunlight, my heart pounding, but lighter than it had ever been. I didn't cry afterward. That surprised me. I went home, made tea, and sat by the window while the city moved around me like nothing monumental had just happened. Cars passed, dogs barked, life continued. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was chasing closure. I already had it. The records arrived a week later, the final piece. A name, an address, a man who existed quietly on the other side of my life. I didn't contact him, not yet, because healing isn't about replacing one parent with another. It's about deciding who gets access to you now. And for the first time, that decision was mine. The truth didn't destroy me. It explained me. My father didn't give me space after the wedding. I knew he wouldn't. Men like him don't retreat when they lose control. They tighten their grip. Silence to him wasn't a boundary, it was a challenge. The calls started 3 days later. First from a blocked number, then from his office line, then from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly concerned about family unity. I didn't answer any of them, not because I was afraid of what he'd say, but because I was afraid of what I might feel if I listened. Anger had kept me standing for years. I wasn't ready to let it go yet. But grief has a way of slipping through cracks. One evening, as I was throwing out old mail, I found a photo tucked into a drawer I hadn't opened in years. Me at 7, sitting on the front steps, my father behind the camera. I remembered that day. Lila had just learned to ride a bike. He'd spent hours running behind her, laughing, cheering, clapping when she finally stayed upright. I sat on the steps with scraped knees and a book I couldn't focus on. At some point, he'd turned the camera on me. I'd smiled automatically. That smile haunted me now. Not because it was fake, but because it was hopeful. And hope is dangerous when it's misplaced. The voicemail he left that night was different. Not angry, not demanding. Tired. "Aurora," he said, "I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need to explain myself. Not for forgiveness, for truth." I almost deleted it. Instead, I listened again. "You weren't supposed to find out like that," he continued. "Your mother begged me not to tell you. She thought it would hurt you more." I closed my eyes. "Maybe I was wrong," he admitted, "but I wasn't cruel on purpose." That line did it. Cruelty doesn't require intent. It only requires neglect. Still, a small part of me wondered what explanation could possibly justify a lifetime of emotional distance. Against my better judgment, I texted back, "One conversation, public place." His reply came immediately, "Thank you." We met at a quiet cafe near the river, neutral territory, no memories attached. He arrived early. That surprised me. He stood when he saw me, unsure whether to hug me. I stayed where I was. "Sit," I said. He did. Up close, I noticed how much older he looked. His hands shook slightly as he wrapped them around his cup. "I won't stay long," I said. "Say what you came to say." He nodded, took a breath. "I knew from the beginning you weren't mine," he admitted. There it was, plain, undeniable. "I agreed to raise you because your mother was terrified. The other man didn't want to be involved." I clenched my jaw. "But every time I looked at you, I was reminded of her betrayal." My stomach twisted. "So I punished her by punishing me," I said. He flinched. "I didn't know how not to." I let out a bitter laugh. "You had decades to learn." He nodded. "Yes." Silence stretched between us. "I loved you," he said finally, "just not the way a father should." I leaned back in my chair. "That's not love," I said calmly. "That's tolerance." His eyes filled. "I tried to make it right with Lila, to be better. And in doing so, you made it worse with me." He nodded again. "I don't want anything from you," I said. "Not explanations, not apologies, not money." He looked up sharply. "Money?" I asked. "Didn't you think I didn't notice? College loans, rent struggles, medical bills. You helped her with all of it." He looked away. "I wasn't your responsibility," I continued, "but you made sure I felt that every day." His voice cracked. "What do you want, Aurora?" I thought about that. What I'd wanted at 10, at 20, at graduation. Then I shook my head. "I don't want Aurora anymore," I said. "That name belongs to the girl who waited." His face fell. "So now what?" "Now," I said, standing, "you live with the truth, the same way I had to." I left before he could say anything else. 2 days later, I got a call from Lila. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "I didn't know," she said immediately. No accusation, no edge, just exhaustion. "I swear to you, I didn't know." "I believe you," I said. She exhaled shakily. "Everything feels different now." "It is," I replied. "That doesn't mean it's broken. It just means it's honest." She was quiet for a moment. "Dad's not handling it well." I said nothing. "He keeps saying he wants to fix things." "That's not your job," I said gently. "Is it yours?" she asked. I closed my eyes. "No," I said. "It never was." When the call ended, I felt something shift. Not reconciliation, not forgiveness. Release. What I didn't yet realize was that my father's need for control hadn't ended, because when people lose their version of the story, they often try to rewrite yours. And the next move he made would force me to protect my new identity in a way I never expected. 3 weeks later, I received a legal notice addressed to Aurora Vale, challenging my name change and questioning my inheritance rights to something I never knew existed. The envelope looked official, too official to be ignored. Cream paper, government seal, my old name typed cleanly across the front like it still belonged to me. Aurora Vale. Not Rowan. Not the woman I had become on purpose. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a formal notice, language dense and cold, the kind designed to intimidate. It questioned the legitimacy of my legal name change, requested clarification of identity, referenced potential inheritance interests tied to the Vale family estate. I laughed once, loud, sharp. Inheritance? I'd grown up counting coins for bus fare while my sister traveled. I signed student loans while she received checks. Now, suddenly, I was valuable, only not as myself. I called the number listed at the bottom of the page. The lawyer on the other end spoke carefully, professionally. "Your father is restructuring his estate," he said. "He wants to ensure all legal names are properly documented." "Does he want me back?" I asked. "Or does he want control?" A pause. "That depends on your cooperation." There it was, the truth beneath the paperwork. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with every document I owned spread out before me. Birth records, name change forms, letters from my mother, proof of the life I had built without him. For years, I believed survival was strength. Now I understood that definition was power. They couldn't manipulate what they couldn't name. I hired my own lawyer the next morning, a woman named Claire, sharp, unimpressed by emotional manipulation disguised as legality. "He can't undo your name change," she said flatly after reviewing everything, "and he can't force you into an inheritance you don't want." "I don't want anything," I said. She looked at me over her glasses. "Then don't sign anything. Silence is a position." For the first time, I smiled. My father tried calling again, then texting, then emailing, long messages that swung wildly between apology and accusation. "I'm doing this to protect you. You don't understand how these things work. You're making things difficult for everyone." I didn't reply, because I finally understood something essential. Boundaries feel like punishment to people who benefited from your lack of them. Lila showed up instead. She stood in my doorway looking smaller somehow, less certain. "I don't know where I fit anymore," she admitted. I stepped aside, let her in. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, two women raised in the same house but in different realities. "I always thought you didn't need him," she said quietly. "You were capable." That's the lie. Capability doesn't cancel out need. She nodded slowly. "I see that now." She hesitated. "He's afraid." "Of what?" "That if you disappear completely, it proves something about him." I considered that. Truth usually does. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. "My mother kept this," she said. "She wanted you to have it when you were ready." Inside was a locket. my mother's picture on one side, mine as a baby on the other. I swallowed hard. "She loved you," Lila said, in case you ever doubted that. I closed the locket gently. "I never did," I said. "I just didn't know how much." The legal letters stopped after that. So did the calls. My father retreated, not out of understanding, but defeat. And that was enough, because peace doesn't require apology. It requires distance. I didn't win anything tangible. No money, no house, no reclaimed father. What I gained was far rarer, ownership of my own story. And now I'll tell you how I built a life under a name that finally felt like mine, and what I said the last time my father ever tried to reach me. I didn't rebuild my life overnight. Movies like to pretend reinvention is dramatic. New cities, new wardrobes, bold declarations made under neon lights. Mine was quieter, more honest. It looked like mornings without dread, like coming home and not bracing myself for disappointment, like answering to a name that didn't feel borrowed. Rowan. That was who I became when no one was watching. I moved apartments, not far, just enough to feel intentional. I changed my routines, found a small cafe where the barista remembered my order, started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I was finally ready to understand myself without defending my pain. The therapist asked me once, "What did you lose when you changed your name?" I thought about it for a long time. "I lost the hope that my father would become who I needed," I said. "And what did you gain?" "Myself." Life didn't magically become easy. Some nights, grief crept in unannounced. Not loud, not destructive, just heavy. I mourned the father I never had, the childhood where love felt conditional, the version of me who believed that being good long enough would make me chosen. But grief didn't own me anymore. It visited, then it left. Lila and I found a new rhythm, careful, honest, no pretending. We met occasionally, coffee, walks, quiet conversations where we didn't orbit our father anymore. Sometimes she apologized for things she didn't even remember doing. Sometimes I stopped her. "You don't need to carry what wasn't yours," I told her. She nodded, learning like I was. She never asked me to come back. I never asked her to leave. That was growth. The final message from my father came 6 months later. Not a call, not a letter, an email. Subject line, "For what it's worth." I stared at it for a long time before opening it. He wrote about regret, about age, about realizing too late that authority isn't love. He said he was proud of me, finally used my accomplishments instead of my resilience as proof of worth. He ended it with, "You'll always be my daughter, no matter what name you use." I closed the laptop, not because I hated him, but because I no longer needed him to validate what I already knew. I didn't reply. That was my answer. On my 33rd birthday, I took myself to the coast. Just me, a small rented car, an ocean that didn't care who raised me or failed to. I stood barefoot in the sand, waves washing over my feet, and said my name out loud. Rowan. It sounded steady, complete. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for anyone to show up. I already had. But healing isn't linear, and the last time I saw my father wasn't the last time he tried to remind me who I used to be or who he believed I should remain. The last time I saw my father wasn't planned. Life has a way of arranging confrontations only after you've stopped rehearsing them. It was a year after the wedding, a gray afternoon. I was leaving a bookstore downtown, arms full, mind elsewhere, when I heard my old name spoken aloud. Aurora. I stopped. Slowly, I turned. He stood there on the sidewalk, thinner than I remembered, his coat hanging loosely from his shoulders. For a moment, neither of us moved. People passed between us, unaware that a lifetime of silence had just cracked open. "You look well," he said. I am, I replied, and I meant it. He nodded, like that answer both comforted and unsettled him. I wasn't sure I'd recognize you. I smiled faintly. That's kind of the point. We stood there, two adults no longer bound by obligation, only history. I won't take much of your time, he said. I just wanted to see you. I considered him, not as a father, not as an authority, just as a man who had made choices and now lived with them. Why? I asked. He hesitated. Because I finally understand something. I waited. You didn't leave because you were angry, he said. You left because staying was killing you. The honesty surprised me. Yes, I said. He continued. I thought changing your name was a rejection of me, but I see now it was an act of survival. Something loosened in my chest. I wish I'd known how to love you properly, he said. I believed him, and that was enough. I don't need anything from you, I said gently, but I hope you find peace. He nodded. Tears sat in his eyes, unspilled. I think I already lost what I needed to lose to earn that. We stood in silence for a moment longer. Then he did something unexpected. He stepped back, not away, back, making space. Goodbye, Rowan, he said. He used my name. I watched him walk away without calling him back. That's how I knew I was free. I didn't go home and cry. I went home and cooked dinner, called a friend, laughed at something small and stupid. Life continued just as it should. Because closure doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes with calm. Today, when people ask about my family, I tell the truth without bitterness. I'm close with myself, I say, and that's enough. I didn't change my name to punish anyone. I changed it to save myself. And if you're listening to this right now, wondering whether it's too late to choose yourself, let me tell you something I learned the hard way. It never is. You are not required to carry a name, a role, or a story that was built from neglect. You don't owe access to people who only value you when you're convenient. And becoming yourself will always upset those who benefited from you staying small. That's not your burden to manage. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family or had to walk away to heal, have you ever experienced betrayal like this? Share your story in the comments.